psychos.
Oh my God, that's funny.
I'm going to repeat it.
You won't get the shock and awe from me, though.
I know, but I'm going to repeat it anyway.
The reaction.
All right, everyone, this is a public service announcement, Katie.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing here. This is not for you.
Yeah,
this is for our listeners. So stop making it about you. Listeners, I was just talking to Katie before we started to roll that my ear, nose, and throat doctor told me today that my ears were too clean. I know you all were very curious.
Yeah, we've
but you're not supposed to clean your ears too often because the wax serves as a protective barrier. So
a functional barrier.
You know, the more you know.
A functional barrier.
Functional barrier.
That's really great.
We're going to start to drop these little pearls of wisdom into the show.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think getting free medical advice is, it's another value add.
Yeah, she was awesome. Dr. King in Chinatown, thank you. She's brilliant.
As mentioned previously, not necessarily on the pod, but I used to call on ENTs, and they're really great doctors because it's actually like what they cover is like your head, except with everything not your brain. And maybe your eyes too. A little bit of sinus related to that. There's a lot going on in there. A lot of tubes. A lot of tubes and functionalities.
Yeah. Well, I lost my sense of smell about 20 years ago. And
what?
Yeah, I have from chronic sinus problems. And it's like the nerve apparently the smell nerves are right here in your body. And if you burn them out, they don't regenerate. And I did acupuncture. I tried, but it's something like 75%. We'll have to fact check this. 75% of your taste is contingent on having smell. So like it is a big quality of life issue and also a little bit of a health issue because I've gotten like food sickness sometimes. Like I've gotten like bad food's gone off and I couldn't smell it. And all right, this
really?
Well, yeah. I mean that's like a protective measure of like.
Is it a functional barrier?
All right. Yeah. The moment we're starting this off on kind of like a gross. I'm a little sassy today, Katie. We're a little sassy today.
We're like, what is it? In England, they have those TV shows that are like gross and embarrassing bodies.
Disgusting bodies. I lived in the UK. I lived in London for a couple of years. And it's like, it would go on at 9:00 at night and there'd be like, this full nudity. Like, I guess the deal is, again, someone can fact check this. So we'll just talk about like, they have this like mobile medical van that goes around and like you get free, work, even though they have NHS there, but like you can go be seen by a doctor, but then of course you have to be filmed, consent to having your self videoed. And sometimes it's like, I've got this giant pustule on this part of my body. And then, and it's like, what is it? And it's supposed to like, destigmatize talking about these things and like, hey, a lot of people, especially men, don't look at things, or if it's embarrassing or scary, people don't get it checked out. And so a good show.
Oh, you're right, because it did have nudity. I mean, that was part of the shock, is it would just be like the great reveal to the person sitting there completely nude with like I
think it's 9:00 there. They have a different. You okay over there in Boston, Katie?
They're coming for me. Yeah, they heard. This is where there's actually a lot of vigilance here about like earwax. So I think I got.
All right.
They picked me up on the scanner.
This is clearly not a safe space for me to talk about.
It's totally
vulnerable
safe.
Issues.
It's totally
microaggressions aside.
It's a microaggression. It really, like, honestly, I think that it's like having a pristine ear canal is just, a very lovely notion. So, but I get it. You've taught me something. It's important.
You're welcome.
These are important things. We're a show about important things. We have no, like, that's actually, I think, what our tagline should be, a show about important things.
Just keep it simple.
Yeah.
Keep it simple. But we're talking about something important today, I think.
Yeah. What is it? Talk to me. What are we doing? Oh boy. Are we doing it? Are we going to actually do this?
You were doing
dare?
it. I think so. Dare? I mean,
all right. Well, if you say so. I think if we're going to kind of open up and, sort of talk about earwax, why not talk about the second most shocking taboo, which is, stay tuned. All right. So on today's episode, we are tackling a major issue companies are facing: employee retention. As it's more commonly known, job hopping. Keeping talent isn't just about avoiding turnover, it's about keeping the knowledge that drives innovation, solves problems faster, and makes everything run smoother. A stable team boosts morale, builds healthier cultures, and creates stronger collaboration, all of which lead to happier customers and fewer costly mistakes. And let's be real, high turnover is expensive. Recruiting, training, and lost productivity all add up. So if retention is so valuable, why are people leaving faster than ever? Let's dig into what's really going on.
Katie, I know it's going to be hard for you to believe this, but I'm Gen X.
No.
I know.
I thought you were Alpha.
Yeah. Well, I am Alpha, but I'm not Gen Alpha. Right. All right. Sassy. All right. So I grew up with parents and grandparents who would be working age between 1950 and 1970, which is why I think my idea of working is from that era, right? I'm growing up and watching adults work in that era. And what are the hallmarks of these decades, you're asking? Well, this is the time of the job for life years. It was common for Americans to work for one company for most, if not the entirety, of their careers. This was especially true in manufacturing, automotive, and industrial sectors. Career stability equated to a successful life. This is when the middle class exploded in the US. Unions, especially in the areas I just mentioned, flourished, which led to wage increases, better job security, career advancement, and stability. Companies rewarded and competed for employees with generous pensions, health insurance, and retirement plans, which then further incentivized long-term tenure. Companies held a paternalistic role, creating an unwritten employer-employee social contract. Workers were expected to ascend over time based on seniority and experience. And while many jobs still required long hours, there was a clear separation between personal and professional lives, because remember, these were the days before computers, no less mobile phones. And while there were still very extreme divides for genders, the benefits I've just mentioned applied to both white and blue collar jobs.
As you mentioned, the generation before ours experienced like more of a sense of mutual obligation between employers and employees. One thing to consider is that the stability was often limited to certain groups, primarily white men, and also
spoiler alert. Sorry.
There were two groups. It was white men and white men that were experiencing these benefits. So, women, people of color, and other marginalized groups were systematically excluded from the most stable, high-paying jobs. I mean, still, even when they were allowed in, and by they, I mean we were allowed in, we faced discriminatory pay and limited opportunities for advancement. So while some workers enjoyed long-term job security, it wasn't a universal experience. This traditional dynamic of the paternalistic relationship role that companies played, not often discussed, is how this held up certain societal structures that would carry through the 70s all the way till when there were disruptions in the workforce, that began to emerge then. The US economy began to face structural challenges and economic competition from new global players, thinking about like the end of the 70s, early 80s. And another disruptor was the social movements like civil rights and women's liberation, which started to challenge traditional workplace demographics and dynamics. So globalization and economic challenges hit hard in the 80s and 90s. Not to mention the impact of Milton Friedman economics, which were emphasizing and and granting permission to value the shareholder over the stakeholder, meaning profits over people, aka trickle down economics, creating more intense pressure for profits. So this led to cost cutting exercises like downsizing, restructuring, layoffs, which began to occur more often. As a result, the long-term job stability defined in earlier generations started to wane. Other measures such as outsourcing, offshoring, and shifting to contract workers, it just became more commonplace. And by these recent decades, factors such as the gig economy started with the rise of more flexible, temporary, part-time, and freelance work. As a result, workers began to move between companies more often.
Yeah, and then you bring in tech, right, in the 90s and 2000s, and now you see more changing tenure patterns, right? Because the fast-paced nature of tech and change ended up leading to more frequent job changes as workers move between startups and established companies, seeking higher wages and more appealing benefits. Corporate loyalty further diminishes as workers seek better opportunities. And I think the main industries we're thinking about here is tech, finance, and some of the creative industries. So now it's normal, right? Fast forward, for people to change jobs every 2 to 5 years. And in the last 15 years, tenure norms shift even more as Millennial and Gen Z workers come into the workforce. Workers from these groups value flexibility, work-life balance, and remote work. Unlike earlier generations, they identify less with their jobs and don't include brand prestige as a consideration. Instead, they're more focused on company values, culture, and social responsibility programs. So all of this said, Americans are feeling more pressure to thrive financially, and job instability adds to that stress. Companies, meanwhile, are frustrated by loss of institutional knowledge, quiet quitting, and modern worker expectations. So what does this all mean for companies and employees? Is it possible for us to all work together, and can't we all get along? So there's a lot to break down here for both employers and for employees. So let's start the conversation.
Hey, fellow psychos, if you enjoyed the show, please click like, subscribe, and share it with other psychos you know. We'd also love to hear from you, so please hit us up on our socials. We're at Business Psychos Pod on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.